Hey guys, Kenna here. Today we're going to go ahead and cover cell specialization and body systems. So let's jump right in. Our essential questions for today. Number one, why is cell specialization required for multicellular organisms? Number two, what is the relationship between structure and function in the various levels of organization, from organelles to cells to tissues and so on and so forth? This theme of structure and function is one that recurs a lot in biology, and hopefully you're starting to recognize that there's a relationship that the structure of the organism, organelle allows it to be more efficient or better at its particular function. And then essential question number three, what is the relationship between tissues, organs, and organ systems in relation to the organism? Now, when we start talking about life, which is biology, the study we're looking at, we had mentioned that the first level that really is considered alive is the cell. That's right. So, cells are this basic unit of life. In fact, every one of us starts out as just one single cell. And we'll talk later on in this term about the process of cell division and how that cell becomes the multicellular organism. But just for now, remember that every single one of us starts out as a single cell. And every cell is a living system that can grow and reproduce. It can capture and transform energy and pass along genetic information. The unity of life at the cellular level allows us to use organisms like bacteria, fruit flies, even worms as model systems to better learn how cells interact to produce the remarkable properties shared by all living things, including ourselves. Now, this should sound somewhat familiar. Do you remember the concept of emergence from our first day of class? The study of cell specialization is an exploration in the emergence of everything from large scale movement to higher level thinking. But to really understand life at the cellular level, we begin by looking at single celled organisms. Now, in this slide, we are looking at the false color micrograph of plankton. That's what's in blue. Plankton are unicellular marine organisms that do everything you would expect a living thing to do. They range from prokaryotic phytoplankton to eukaryotic algae. Plankton are the diverse collection of organisms that live in large bodies of water and are unable to swim against the current. They provide a crucial source of food to many small and large aquatic organisms. Everything from bivalves to fish to even whales rely on these types of organisms for their food source. But while cells are the basic units of living things, sometimes a single cell actually is the organism. In fact, in terms of their numbers, unicellular organisms dominate life here on Earth. But not all life on our planet is unicellular, and these more complicated, typically larger organisms require a process known as specialization in order to survive. So, why do we specialize? Well, first, let's take a look at some single celled organism. In this case, you're given an example of amoeba. Now, a single celled organism performs all of the required functions of one cell in one cell because that one cell is the entire organism. So, a cell like this, single celled organism, doesn't specialize. It can't because that single cell has to perform all of the functions of life for that organism. However, in multicellular organisms, the larger size means they need many different types of cells to carry out the same life processes. Each of these special types of cells has a different structure that helps it perform specific function. The process by which they develop these different structures to reflect their functions is known as cell specialization. So, because these multicellular organisms are more complex and the body still has the same needs to supply food and nutrients, transport materials, remove wastes, fight infection, it has to go ahead and make these cells really good at very specific jobs and then share the burden of performing those for the organism. So let's go ahead and give you a couple examples. I'll do examples with both animals and with plants. Let's go ahead and start with animals. Now, all of your cells need oxygen and they release carbon dioxide as a waste. Carrying gases to and from the body is the job of your red blood cells, which in this particular picture are shown in pink. These cells flow through the blood vessels of varying lengths and widths, and in this particular micrograph, the cells in the wall of the blood vessel and surrounding tissue are stained purple. Notice that the vessel is wide enough for many red blood cells to pass through together. The path through the narrowest vessels, called capillaries, is only as wide as a single red blood cell. So these different structures, whether it's the red blood cell that you see here carrying the gases, or whether it's the tissue that makes up the wall of the blood vessel, they have a specific structure that reflects the function that they need to perform. Okay, as the narrowing occurs for the blood vessel, you don't want to get a red blood cell that's larger than that smallest narrowing of the blood vessel because then it wouldn't fit through. It would get stuck, it would get backed up, and there are problems in the functioning of the overall organism. So your body becomes really fine tuned at doing specific processes in a particular way that is efficient for the overall organism. Plants do something very similar. This particular micrograph shows a plant cell that contains many green oval-shaped structures. If we had been in class and done the microscope lab, we would have seen that these are chloroplasts and they actually do something called chloroplast streaming or cytoplasmic streaming if there are a lot of them in active plants. Now, these specialized cells have numerous chloroplasts typically found in the leaves of most plants. Cells and other plant parts have few, if any, chloroplasts. For example, the roots. Roots are underground, so because they're underground, they're not going to do photosynthesis because they don't really get any sun. But instead, root cells have tiny hairs on their outer layer, which helps them to increase water uptake. In some flowers, certain cells are specialized for making sweet smelling nectar. This is important for the plant to develop so it can attract animal pollinators to go ahead and reproduce. So, whether it's a plant cell, an animal cell, or even the smaller cells of littler insects or something like that, we're still dealing with specialization that allows the organism to be more efficient. Now, the process by which this specialization occurs is known as cellular differentiation. And we'll talk more about this when we get into cell division and mitosis later in this term. But this process is where all of the cells of your body started from. Remember, we said that all organisms start as a single cell, and all of your cells in your body originated from that original zygote undergoing this process of mitosis that we'll cover in more depth later. So, as the embryo develops, cells change their shape and contents to reflect the function that they need to perform. So, these cells all get really good at particular things and then they work in groups. And so we've created kind of an organizational structure to better understand the relationship of the cell to the ultimate organism. So let's take a look at a human body organization. Now, specialized cells perform specialized functions in multicellular organisms. Groups of specialized cells cooperate to form a tissue, let's say muscle. Different tissues are in turn grouped together to form larger functional units that we call organs. And each type of cell, tissue, and organ has a very distinct structure and set of functions that serve the organism as a whole. So we can take the human body as the organism, and that is composed of organ systems. And those organ systems are composed of organs. Those organs are composed of tissues, tissues are composed of cells, and we could even go further if we wanted to, but we're going to stop at cells because remember, that's the first level that we identify as being living. Did you ever wonder why we use the term organism for a person or an animal or a plant? The term organism actually comes from the Greek word for instrument or tool, but it is directly related to the term organization. And so you can see here, it's this emerging structure that comes out from the interaction of all these smaller little pieces. And this shouldn't be too much of a surprise. We were talking something very similar when we were looking at the emergent property of things like polymers. We've got a series of monomers and they interact in a certain way that gives you a particular property for the polymer itself. So you see this in a lot of different areas when we go ahead and start looking at biology in terms of its themes. Okay. So, if you're interested in studying how the human body works, or other organisms for that matter, I would encourage you to go ahead and look at taking IB Sports Exercise Health. This is our anatomy course and will help you get ready if you're thinking about maybe a career in medicine, whether that's human medicine, vet medicine, or something else. All right. Now, I think it's worth taking the time to go really quickly through and take a look at some of these body systems so that you get an exposure to them if you haven't already. Now, you probably did some of this before in middle school, so we won't take a whole lot of time here. If you need more time, please feel free to go ahead and stop the video at any point, pause it, and look up or take any information you need. So, the body systems that we look to focus on today include the nervous system, which coordinates the body's response to changes in its internal and external environments. The skeletal system, which stores mineral reserves and provides a site for blood cell formation. The integumentary system, which serves as a barrier against infection and injury. If you haven't recognized, this is your skin. You have the endocrine system, which eliminates wastes and maintains homeostasis. This is a lot of your glands. We've got lymphatic and immune systems, which helps protect the body from disease. You've got your muscular system, which helps produce voluntary movement, circulate your blood, and move the food through your body. We've got the reproductive system, which produces your reproductive cells of the sperm and the egg. We've got the respiratory system, which provides oxygen and removes carbon dioxide. This is the gas exchange you have to do routinely. We've got the excretory system, which helps you to eliminate waste and, again, maintain homeostasis. We've got the circulatory system, which brings materials to the cells, fights infection, and helps to regulate your body temperature. And then lastly, we have the digestive system, which converts your food so that it can be used as energy for your cells. Now, this is a brief overview, and I'll spend a brief amount of time on each of the individual systems here. But again, be looking at it in terms of structure and function. What is the need that that particular organ systems, and the cells that build it up has to perform? And how does the structure of those cells, of those tissues, of those organs meet those needs? Again, remember, structure is related to function. So if we start here with the nervous system, some big things to go ahead and look at. At the top there, you've got a nice cell that we recognize as the neuron. Okay, and it has this particular structure that goes ahead and has all these little branches coming off of it, and it's got the long, thinned end on it. And this is to allow it to go ahead and take chemical electrical signals and transfer them through the body. It's a really quick response system that allows you to go ahead and take information from different parts of your body and send it to your brain. Sometimes it doesn't always go to the brain, but even to build your thoughts, to go ahead and allow you to remember things. And that gets stored inside your brain. Okay, so again, remember, the purpose of the nervous system is to coordinate the body's response to changes in its internal and external environment. Just a short list of some of the major pieces or major organs. You've got your brain, you've got your spinal cord, you've got your nerves, and it might be worth going ahead and checking out this structure right here that is the neuron. Okay, so maybe we should go ahead and label it. This is a neuron. Okay, so the neuron is one of the primary cells that we go ahead and see inside the nervous system. You still have your nucleus, still have your cytoplasm, but this is a highly adapted cell to perform a very particular task. Okay. The next system we're going to look at is the skeletal system. And honestly, I could have just listed bone after bone after bone. I'm not going to go ahead and do that, but your major organs here are the bones themselves. And the purpose here is to provide structure and support to the organism body. Uh, your movement is possible because of the skeletal system. Skeletal system holds things in place, keeps them where they're supposed to be. And inside the skeletal system, if we think about the bone marrow, we're actually producing the blood cells that we'll look at a little bit later. Okay, let's move on. We've got the integumentary system, acts as outer barrier to protect us from the external environment. We've got our skin, your hair, your nails. Okay. Then we're going to move on to the endocrine system. The purpose here is to help with growth and development, helps with metabolism and reproduction. This is really where we do a lot of the work producing and secreting our hormones. Okay. Now, if you think about it, since hormones are by and large proteins, what organelle are you going to see a lot of in the endocrine system? Hopefully you recognize that this should be the ribosome. Whether these are ribosomes attached to the rough endoplasmic reticulum or whether they're free ribosomes, you need to have ribosomes to make proteins, which are important here. So what kind of organs are we looking at? A short example here, hypothalamus, pituitary gland, thyroid, parathyroid, adrenal glands, pancreas, testes, ovaries. All of these are really important in terms of the secretion of hormones. And when you go ahead and start taking a look at some of these tissues, going ahead and looking at some of these cells, they reflect that because that's their primary function. All right, let's move on to the lymphatic system and the immune system. Now, the big job here is to remove infectious disease and other pathogens for the body. We don't want you to get sick. Now, you'll see here too, we've got some organs that we already listed before. We already mentioned the skin as part of the integumentary system. There are organs that perform functions across multiple systems, and that shouldn't be a surprise to you. We also have our white blood cells, and there's a list of some of the white blood cells on the right there. And then we have our lymph nodes. Now, the lymphatic system kind of takes your dead, decaying, these types of things and pulls them out of the body. So you've got a whole system that spreads all through your body. And if we get an opportunity to talk about cancer in some detail towards the end of the term, I hope you'll recognize just how important the lymph nodes end up being, taking wastes away. But that also can cause problems when it comes to transmission of things like cancer cells. So you've got things like your monocytes, eosinophils, basophils, lymphocytes, neutrophils. These are all different types of white blood cells that are part of your immune system to help you fight off disease. See, look how varied they are depending on their particular jobs. And these are all white blood cells. Okay. Again, structure and function. The structure of the cell reflects the function that it must perform. Then we get to the muscular system. There are three primary types of muscle that we talk about. We talk about cardiac, smooth, and skeletal. To work with the skeletal and nervous system to produce movement and to help circulate blood through the human body. Now, if you look at these different cell types, they actually look very much like their function. Smooth muscle tends to be a little less ropey, it's a little more thin and light. But skeletal muscle, which is going to hold you up, has to be really strong and sturdy. And cardiac muscle has to be a long term, high endurance muscle because it's going to have to pump your heart for the rest of your life. So, all three different cell structures reflect their function once again. Okay. Then we get to the reproductive system to produce gametes and ultimately offspring for the species to continue on the species. So the major organs we typically talk about in females are the ovaries, uterus, and breasts. In the males, it's the testes and the penis. And one of the most interesting adaptive cells that we start looking at in a very simple way that I think is a good one to start exploring is the sperm. Now, the sperm is a really modified cell. It actually has very few different organelles and functions. Most of those are going to be given to the new organism from the egg cell. So the sperm is highly evolved to go ahead and enter the egg and to swim to get to the egg. So it has a little flagella at the end to help it to swim. It's got a little protein packet at the tip of it to help with digestion to get into the egg cell. And otherwise, it's going to have a whole bunch of mitochondria to provide it with energy to do the swim so that it can go ahead and get where it needs to go. So again, highly modified to go ahead and perform a very specific task, form, and function. Then we go ahead and move on to the respiratory system. Its job is to go ahead and perform those gas exchanges. We've got our lungs, nose, mouth, and trachea. And so, really, we're trying to get in oxygen for the blood and remove the carbon dioxide. Now, the removal of the carbon dioxide and the breathing of it out is actually a process that could be considered part of the excretory system. This is what primarily removes waste from your blood and regulates concentration of body fluids. When we typically talk about the excretory system, we're focused on solid and liquid waste rather than gaseous waste. So, this is going to include things like the kidneys, urinary bladder, ureters, urethra, skin, lungs, and how we go ahead and make the waste that our body doesn't want to keep inside because it becomes cytotoxic. How do we get it out of the body? Which leads us to the circulatory system. The primary function of the circulatory system is to transport nutrients, hormones, wastes, gases to the places where they need to go. We got to get the good gases like oxygen into the cells and the bad gases like carbon dioxide back to the lungs to exhale out. Any wastes that build up when we start looking at things that the body can't use from digestion through the stomach or intestines, then has to be concentrated and put back into the either the bladder, if we can put it into a liquid form, or into the intestines to go ahead and defecate out. Okay, hormones need to be transported from the cell of origin. When we start looking at things like the testes or ovaries producing key hormones for sexual development, for example, those travel through the bloodstream to get to their target. So, the circulatory system includes the heart, the blood vessels, including arteries, veins, and capillaries, as we mentioned before, your blood, lymph, and lymph nodes. Now, I realize that lymph and lymph nodes were listed before. And so, again, while they can be included as part of the immune system, they can also be included as part of the circulatory system here as well. And then the last system that we said we would cover is the digestive system, whose major job is to extract and absorb nutrients from our food and to concentrate waste so they can be eliminated using the excretory system. This helps us to maintain water and chemical balances in our body and includes organs like the mouth, throat, esophagus, stomach, liver, pancreas, and intestines. Now, we've gone over in very quick form the different systems of the body. And again, I really want to encourage you that if you're interested in this sort of stuff and want to spend more time on it, to go ahead and take IB Sports Exercise Health. But in each one of these examples, hopefully you're beginning to realize that the size and shape of the cell relates to its job. Okay. Form equals function. That's a really key part of biology and a theme that you're going to see repeated over and over and over again, whether it's neurons or bone cells or pancreatic cells. The cells reflect the job that they perform. Okay. Here's another example of the same thing, whether it's epithelial tissue or muscle tissue or nervous tissue, those cells are going to be shaped to optimally perform their particular job. Now, we have some activities today that's going to look at this a little more detail, but I hope you remember that form equals function is one of our key takeaways for today, and that our body, because we're multicellular, is going to have this type of cell specialization, which is going to allow the cells to work together as tissues, the tissues to work together as organs, the organs to work together as organ systems, and ultimately all the organ systems to work together to make up us, the final organism that we're talking about. All right, guys, I hope you're doing well. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.